Okay. Okay, so thank you for having me. I hope you can hear me well. My name is Michal Krol. I'm an assistant professor at City University of London. I work mostly with blockchain and distributed systems. What I'm going to present today is called Discv5, so Service Discovery version 5. And this is a cooperation with my colleagues Ono, Sergi, Etienne, and Felix, and in general with the Ethereum Foundation. So we designed the system for Ethereum, and now we are starting, this is still a work in progress. We are now starting a phase of public consultation. So if at some point or later after the talk you have some suggestions, we are very open to any comments. I'm going to start with introducing the Ethereum ecosystem in general. I'll then present the DHT, so distributed hash table of the Ethereum, because this is a required component for our system. I'll then present our system, and then we'll, if time allows, we will finish by some evaluation results. How much time do I have, by the way? Shall I end 10 minutes or 15 minutes before the end of the session, or?
It's a 1 hour, including the questions at the end. 1 hour.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just try to give some time for the questions. Okay, so let's start with the Ethereum ecosystem. As you probably know at this point, Ethereum is one of the largest blockchains. It has its own cryptocurrency. It supports also some smart contracts. And this blockchain is supported by some miners. So those miners, well, they're basically just some machines. They receive the transactions, they process them, they order them, they pack them into the blocks, and then add them to the blockchain. But to perform all those tasks, well, first of all, they have to form a peer-to-peer network. So just some random connections with other peers in the network so that they can exchange, first of all, pending transactions. Then once the block is mined, this block also has to be diffused to all the other miners and so on. So for that, they use what we call an unstructured peer-to-peer network, meaning that each miner will have some incoming and outgoing connections and just be connected to some random peers in the network. Now, when you start an Ethereum node and you want to get into the system, well, first of all, you have to discover some nodes to connect to. And how it's done currently, well, first of all, you'll connect to some bootstrap nodes. Those are usually hard coded in the Ethereum code. And then this bootstrap node will give you enough information for you to join a distributed hash table. So this is a simple DHT. You join this table. You have some peers inside, so you can query them. Then you discover all the other nodes, so all the other miners, and then you can form application-specific, so nodes with the connections with the nodes you want. Now the thing is that this ecosystem or this distributed hash table is not only used by Ethereum mainnets, because in the network we have multiple Ethereum forks, either with the same or different genesis blocks. We have several testnets such as Rinkeby, Ropsten. We have some alternative cryptocurrencies, Pirl, Musicoin, and also additional applications such as iExec and Swarm, which are completely unrelated to blockchain. There is an IMC paper from 2018 or 19 reporting almost 4,000 applications running on the single DHT. And as you can guess, there are large differences in popularity of those applications because, well, Ethereum mainnet is supported by almost every node in the network, while I don't know, Pirl or Musicoin, there is only a small fraction of peers using this application. So in this talk, when I say applications, I mean all those sub protocols running on top of the Ethereum peer-to-peer ecosystem. And the vision of Ethereum is to create a common entry point for multiple peer-to-peer applications. So they very much want to have the single DHT, which will be an entry point for multiple applications, and they can just use it. And on top of that, build their own specific application. So application-specific peer-to-peer connections, whether it's structured, unstructured, doesn't matter because it's the application. And it has several advantages because now not every single small application has to build its own DHT or its own peer-to-peer protocol. We can just reuse what's there, and also it's much more secure because, well, if your small application use the same peer-to-peer infrastructure as Ethereum, it's much more secure. Right. So the difficulty of this is that when imagine you're this miner here, and you just joined the DHT. You discovered some nodes, but at the beginning, you just don't know who runs what applications. So you know that there are different nodes, you know their IDs, but now you don't know who runs your application. And well, you need to discover applications talking, the nodes talking your application to form some peer-to-peer network with them. Because the idea is, well, first of all, you have to discover peers that talk your application. Once you do, you can connect the application, you can connect to them and run, well, exchange some information specific to the application. Now, currently, the Ethereum uses what we call Discv5. So this stands for Service Discovery version 4, which is kind of a brute force approach. So once you join the DHT, you will discover some nodes in this DHT. The DHT allows you to discover nodes or walk in the DHT. So in Discv5, a new node will just perform a random walk in the DHT. So just contact random nodes, and then they will just perform an initial handshake and will say, hey, do you run the same application as I do? If that's the case, well, we can form a full duplex connection. If not, I'll just cancel this connection and I'll just continue the whole process. So this works in a sense, but obviously we have some problems because now, well, it can take quite a lot of, if you're just asking random nodes and every single time you have to initiate a new connection and to ask whether they support the same application or not, it's going to take a long time. And it's not a problem for Ethereum mainnet because, well, I think more than 90% of nodes in the network will be supporting this application. But again, if you're a node from an application when you are only 10 or 20 nodes in the whole network, and in the whole network there are 5,000 nodes, it's going to take a long time to discover your peers. And also you will bother quite a lot of other applications just because you'll be asking, hey, do you talk my application constantly? So the idea with Discv5, so the next version of Service Discovery is instead of just going randomly in the network, can we have a service that will help us with and speed up this process? So basically you want to have kind of some kind of registry where when you start running an application, you can just say, like register yourself saying, hey, I run Ethereum, mainnet or something else, this specific application, and then the others can discover. So they can just query the discovery system saying, hey, I'm also running Ethereum mainnet. Can you give me a list of all the nodes running the same application? And if that's the case, we'll just receive the nodes plus the information on how to connect to them.
Michal?
Yes?
I have a question to, I don't know if I understood well. For the service discovery, is there a service discovery per application, or do you have something centralized? And with the same system, service discovery, you can discover different applications.
So the first question is the service discovery centralized, right?
No, is there a single service discovery for all the application using Ethereum, or is there one per application?
Right. No, so there is a common service discovery for all the applications. So all the nodes from all the application can register to the service, and then you can query the service for any application you want. Okay. Right. So once we have this server, this register, well, obviously we don't want to make it centralized. So we don't want to have like a centralized machine standing and registering because, well, then it will make it a fully trusted third party. So why even bother with blockchain and all the decentralization, right? So we would like to have this kind of register, but obviously want to make it decentralized. So it's running on top of the distributed hash table. And well, this whole register is distributed also across the nodes participating in the DHT. So because we built on the DHT, so let me introduce very briefly the Ethereum distributed hash table. Distributed hash tables were developed quite a long time ago, but they didn't evolve much since the beginning of 2000. So the Ethereum DHT is based on Kademlia. There are some minor tweaks, but it's basically the same. All the operations are mostly the same. So each node is uniquely identified by its randomly generated ID. This ID is actually just a Marshall version of the node public key. So when you join the DHT, you'll generate a public private key pair. Then you'll hash your public key, and this will be your ID in the DHT as well. Those keys are also used to secure point-to-point connections between nodes, so we can secure the communication, make it to assure integrity and confidentiality. And as for you, like usually the case for the DHT, you can also store some data in it, so it can act as a key value store. If you want to add some data to the DHT, you'll basically take the data, you hash it, and the hash of the data shares the hash space with the node IDs. And this hash of the data will become the key of the data in the DHT. And then for the distance, well, in the DHT we organize nodes in a kind of a ring, and then the distance between two IDs, or regardless if it's a node or a data, is expressed as the length of the common prefix of their IDs, as expressed in bits. Right, and for communication, the DHT supports what we call a routing table. This allows us to go to almost any point in the network. So each node has some peers that we discover at the beginning using those bootstrap nodes. Then we discover also later on during some operations. Those peers will be stored in this routing table, and the routing table in DHT is organized in what we call buckets. So we'll have some peers here. But then we'll, at the beginning, take the whole half space. We will cut it in half. The first half we'll call it bucket 1, and then we'll try to find some nodes, the fixed amount of nodes, let's say 2 in this case, and place it in this bucket. Then the remaining part, again, we cut it in 2. This will be our bucket 2, and again we try to find like at least 2 peers in this bucket. Then the remaining quarter we cut it in 2. So we get our bucket 3, and we continue this process until, well, in Ethereum we have 17 buckets, and then in every single bucket we try to have a fixed number of peers, which means that the closer we get to our hash ID, the more detailed view of the network we have. Is there a question or?
No, sorry, just a display issue on our side, but it's okay now.
Okay, shall I continue or?
Yes, not worry.
Okay. Right, and then the most important operation in the DHT is what is called the find node, which allows us, so find node takes a peer ID or a data ID as an argument, and then it finds this node in the DHT. So what is happening basically when I'm in this green node and I want to find a node, let's say in bucket 1, and if I know about this node, I have it in my routing table, it's easy, I just can connect directly. If not, I will ask the closest node I know of to the target ID, and then I'll say, hey, do you know this node, or do you know any closer IDs? And then hopefully the queried node will give me some information or some closer nodes, and either I'll already find out my nodes, or I can repeat the process, just iteratively asking peers for nodes closer to the target ID. In Ethereum DHT, they use several alpha parallel requests just to speed up the process. But yeah, the main idea stays the same. By the way, if something is not clear, just feel free to ask questions during the presentation as well. Okay, so let's go. Let's introduce Discv5. So as I said before, we wanted to build this registry that will allow us to discover peers supporting the same application. The application will be advertised under topics. So I'll use in the talk a term topic, but basically it means an application. So this will be just an identifier of an application. So I can register under the topic being Ethereum mainnet or Ethereum testnet and so on. We didn't want to build something else, something new completely from scratch, and the Ethereum DHT is already there. So that's why this was one of the requirements, that it has to be based on this existing DHT. And for the requirements, we also wanted to make it fast, well, low overhead, and also fair in a sense that we would like to have equal load balance across all the nodes involved in the DHT. And also, we don't want to have a discrimination against unpopular topic or unpopular applications, meaning that we don't want to make life harder for unpopular applications to discover themselves. This is a decentralized system, so we would like to make it robust with network dynamics. And because the system is fully open, anyone can join and can send any arbitrary traffic to any participant in the network. It must be also secure. I'll talk about security later on as well. So in the system, we have three main actors. We have an advertiser. So this is someone who is advertising him or herself under a specific topic, saying, "Hi, I run this application." Then you have registrars. So those will be the nodes holding the information and holding the registry. And then you have searchers. So those are nodes who will eventually ask the registry, saying, "Hey, can you give me the nodes that support this specific application?" And when designing the system, there are basically two main questions that we wanted to answer. So first of all, well, if you know that we have to kind of spread this information across the nodes in the network, the question is, well, where should specific advertisement be placed in this network? And then, because it's an open system, it must be secure, and we have limited resources within every single register. We ask how to ensure fairness with the limited resources of the registrar. Right. So let's start with the first question. So where should be specific ads placed in the network? So now each application or each topic will also have its ID. Well, we can hash it as well, exactly as we do with the data entity. Then we create an ID, and you can represent it somewhere in the DHT ring. So those are the DHT nodes organized in a ring, and here we have our topic. So what we could do, we could well use the built-in DHT put and get. So as I said before, DHT can be used as a key value store, and then, well, the data is being stored on the closest node to the specific data ID. So in our case, it will be the node closest to the topic hash. And, we can just store all the information. So if this is, I don't know, Ethereum mainnet, we can just determine the closest node whose ID is closest to the topic mainnet hash, and we can store all the registration for the specific application on this node. This is fairly fast because the routing in the DHT is very efficient. Its complexity is log n, where n is the number of nodes. It has also pretty low overhead because, again, we just have to contact one node, we store our registration, and it's done. In terms of fairness, we'll have a problem with load balance because if you imagine that this is very popular topic such as Ethereum mainnet, this node will get a lot of traffic because it has to handle all the registration for this specific topic, which can mean 90% of the traffic for a single node, which is a lot. For the discrimination against unpopular topic, this seems to be fine because, well, even if you're an unpopular topic, you just find the closest node to your topic. You can find it very efficiently. So this is not a problem. However, we have problems with network dynamics because, well, if this node goes down or just leaves the network, well, the whole system is paralyzed for a second until someone else is replacing it. And also we have a problem for security because you can imagine now, if we know that the node storing this storing the information about a specific topic is the closest one, as a malicious attacker, I can just try to generate a lot of IDs to be the closest one. Once I'm the closest one, I will be the one telling everyone, handing the discovery for the specific application. So if I'm malicious, I can either say, hey, there are no nodes supporting our application, and I can just return a list of malicious nodes and basically perform an Eclipse attack for the specific application. Another idea would be to use monetization. So I know some peers in the DHT. What I can do, I can just select a random subset of the nodes and just place the ads randomly. The problem is that this is not fast, nor has a low overhead, because either we have to place now a lot of advertisements. So if I want to advertise myself, I have to either place my advertisements on a lot of nodes in the network to make myself easy to discover, but this will cause high overhead. And if I only place advertisements on several nodes, well, I'm going to be very difficult to find, and it's going to take a long time for others to find. The good thing is that we don't have a problem with the load balance because, well, everything is kind of random. So, well, if everyone just follows this procedure, everything is random, so we can expect a uniform load distribution. However, we'll have a problem with discrimination against unpopular topics, because if the network is huge and we have only a few peers supporting a specific application, even if they place a lot of random advertisement, it's going to be very difficult for them to find each other. And finally, the good thing is that it's very robust with the network dynamics. If one node is down, it's not a problem for us. And for security as well, we are pretty resistant to any kinds of attack. Well, now if attacker plays there is no strategic position where you can place yourself to kind of hijack the whole traffic. You can try to generate a lot of identities and put them kind of everywhere in the network, but first of all, it will require a lot of resources, and second of all, it still doesn't guarantee that the attacker can just eclipse a specific application, because again, everything is random. So in Discovery before version 5, we tried to kind of combine advantages of both approaches. And the high-level idea here is that, well, if we have a topic hash or application hash here, represented with the star, we would like to place the advertisements kind of randomly, but with an increasing probability as we go towards the topic hash. So in this space, in this area of the network here, I'm pretty far away from my topic hash. So I may encounter or may place some advertisements, but it's not very likely. But the closer I get to the topic hash, the probability of encountering advertisements will be higher and higher. And well, close to the topic hash is almost guaranteed. And by doing this, well, we hope it's going to be fast, because now if you, well, again, you can always go to this region very fast with the DHT routing. It is fairly low overhead because, well, it's kind of strategic placement. So again, we just can only rely on this region, which is nearby the topic hash. In terms of fairness, we still have a problem with load balance because, well, if those nodes are more likely to receive advertisements for a popular topic, well, this is problematic. They can still expect higher traffic, but we can address it later on. The good news is we don't have discrimination against unpopular topics because, again, even if you're like 3 or 4 for a specific application, you just go towards the topic hash, and here you are almost guaranteed to find some advertisements. And then we hope to inherit the robustness with network dynamics from the random approach, and the same for the security. Because even if now an attacker places itself here, we still have quite a lot of other nodes storing the same application, storing the same advertisement, and able to serve those. Right. So this is how we do it. So first of all, you remember this is the regular routing table of a DHT node. It has those peers organized in the buckets. So in the furthest buckets, we'll have we want to have a fixed amount of peers in every single bucket. Now, from this routing table, we create what we call a ticket or a registration table. So as you see in the picture, in the ticket table, we'll have exactly the same peers. So there are the same peers that we had in the routing table. We just copy them from the routing table to the ticket table, but we'll just organize them differently. So the routing table is organized based on the distance from the advertiser or from the node holding the routing table, while in the ticket table, we'll organize the whole structure based on the distance from the topic hash, represented as the star again here. So again, we do the same thing as before. We cut the hash space on node 2. Then we create bucket 1, and we just keep slicing the whole hash space until we create the buckets, and then we just copy the peers from the routing table. Now the procedure of registration will be: I go to my bucket 1, I take all the peers I know of, and then I select 2 random nodes from this bucket, and I'll send them a registration request saying, hey, I support this application, please register me. At the same time, I will ask them, hey, by the way, do you know any peers that are closer to the topic hash? Or just give me the closest peers to the topic hash that you know of. So this is very similar to the find node operation that we've seen before. And hopefully they'll respond to me, so they will register my advertisement, and they also give me some nodes so I can populate my buckets. This is important because especially if I'm here, I'm green, I'm far away from the topic hash, it means that some of those buckets will be empty for me, because before it was my bucket 1, I didn't have a lot of nodes here. Then I move to bucket 2 and I do exactly the same. So I select some specific number of random nodes, I send them registration request, and I say, hey, by the way, do you know any nodes closer? Hopefully they do. I then go to bucket 3, I repeat the same procedure, and then gradually we'll populate the ticket table while also registering, so placing a fixed amount of advertisements in every single bucket. And if everyone repeats the same process, which, well, you can do only based on your local information, you can see that we achieve kind of the distribution that we wanted. So if I'm far away from the topic hash, the buckets, well, are huge because they cover a lot of hash space, and we place a fixed amount of registration. So it means that we're not very likely to find a lot of advertisements for this specific topic in this space. And then the closer we get to the topic hash, bucket-wise, the more likely we are to encounter registrations for this specific application. And then again, in the closest topic, so in this case, bucket 5, will almost guaranteed to find the application, to find the advertisement for this specific application. Right, so we have the registration, as I presented before, and the lookup is basically the same. So again, if we take this picture, if you're looking for a specific topic, you just take a routing table, you create a new ticket table, and then you just ask a random node in bucket 1 and say, by the way, give me some additional peers. Then you move to bucket 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. What we also do is that we put a limit of the number of advertisements we can retrieve per registrar. So even if I found a registrar, I ask for Ethereum mainnet, and the topic, this registrar has, let's say, 100, and it knows about 100 nodes supporting this application. We say, okay, but give me no more than 10. And then the whole process stops when we obtain, well, beta n. So let's say if beta is 5, it means I'd like to know about 50 nodes in the supporting my application, but I can only retrieve at least 10 from a single registrar. And this gives us two properties. First of all, well, it ensures the diversity of the register that return me to results. So if I'm very unlucky and the first node is malicious, it cannot just give me, 100 nodes and I say, okay, I'm done, because it will expose us to a risk of being eclipsed. And also this is a good for load balance because, well, I start with bucket 1, then bucket 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. But if addressing bucket 1, 2, and 3, I already have enough adds, so let's say beta n, then can just stop and I don't have to go towards buckets 5, 6, 7, and so on. So I don't need to bother the nodes that are closer to the topic hash, which is again good for load balancing. Okay, so we covered the placement. So now we know where I would like to place the advertisements. We know how to find them. Now let's cover the registration procedure. So now, before in the previous slides, we're saying, okay, I chose a node I want to register at. I just send the registration request and it's done. However, it's not that simple. And the problem is, like, if we have advertiser here, we have our register here. Well, if I want to register, I probably have to provide my IP address and maybe some port number, then the ID. So again, this is the hash of my public key, and then the topic, so the application I support. And we can imagine that the advertiser, the register has to store it in some kind of a database. However, well, the size of this database is limited, so we have to be careful not to overload some registers with too much information. And because it's an open system, we can have also some malicious nodes. So as an attacker, I can go to a single register. I don't have to obey the protocol, and I can send a lot of requests saying, well, there is this IP address, this is my ID, and I can generate some random topics. It doesn't have to be even real applications. I just spam a lot of applications, a lot of registrations, and hopefully, if my attack is successful, I can fill completely the database of the register, and then I block any legitimate user from registering, and I can paralyze the system. Obviously, we can have even multiple attackers working together, having different IPs and IDs, and either I want to paralyze one topic, so I send a lot of registration for a specific topic, popular or unpopular, or again, as before, I can do this spam attack where I just generate some attacks, some topics on the fly, and I try to register just to exhaust the resources of the register. So we have two good points that we can rely on. First of all, the attacker's resources are kind of limited, so we can probably create an unlimited amount of civil identities, but at the same time, the attacker can have multiple IPs, so multiple IP addresses, but probably not an unlimited amount of them. So this is something we can use for some kind of civil protection. And also we assume that while an attacker can create as many IDs as it can, because it's just a public key, maintaining an ID or a connection with a specific ID is kind of is costly, because it's an encryption. You have to send some keep alive messages. If everything must be encrypted, so it requires some CPU. So I can generate and maintain quite a lot of those IDs, but not an unlimited amount. So this works kind of like a proof of work, because we bind the identities to a specific resources. But here there are no puzzles to solve. So what was usually being done in the literature, it's also being done now currently in Ethereum, is, well, we can put some limits, saying, okay, a register can say, well, I don't accept more than 2 advertisements per specific IP on per specific ID. And this, again, it kind of works, but it's very difficult to set this number. Because, well, is it 2 or maybe 5 or maybe 10? And well, it can differ because even if now we know what's the size of the network, we don't know what's going to be in 6 months or in 1 year. And also, you can imagine that there are sometimes multiple nodes behind the nut. So if we put kind of arbitrary limits, it's very difficult to set it up, to make it work. So in Discv5, we do a slightly different approach. So again, we have our advertisers here. We have our register. We send a register message, which will contain the topic, the IP address, plus some port number and an ID. Again, for the IP and ID, we can prove that we own them. And then the register will have a topic table, which, well, it's indexed by the topic. Then we have some IP, ID, and also there's an expiry time. So once an advertisement is admitted to the table, it will stay there for a fixed amount of time. In this example, let's say it's half a minute. And after this, it will be automatically discarded. So now when the registration is received, we don't right away admit the registration into the topic table, but we first of all calculate what we call a waiting time. So this is basically telling, okay, I'll add you to the table, but you have to wait for this amount of time. This amount of time, so this waiting time, is based on the diversity and on occupancy. Diversity meaning I take this registration and I compare it against the content of the table. And if this registration in terms of the topic, IP, and ID is very different from what I have in my table, well, this is good for me, so I will probably return a lower waiting time. And on the other hand, if I already have plenty of advertisements from the same IP and ID, I'll increase this waiting time. but we don't put any hard limits on the IP on ID on the top or the topic. And then the second component is the occupancy, meaning that as the table is filling and I have more and more entries in my table, I will slightly increase my waiting time. So this is again just for load balancing. I have a specific limit for the size of my topic table. If when I get close to this limit, I'll just increase the waiting time to slow down the incoming traffic. Now, the registrar takes this information, so the waiting time computed, and also the timestamp of the initial request made by the advertiser, and it puts it in what we call a ticket. So ticket just like a message that will be signed by the registrar. So it will be signed by the private key of the registrar. The advertiser will get it. I will say, okay, I have to wait for this specific amount of time, and then I can try to re-register again. If now the advertiser comes before this waiting time, well, the registrar can detect it because everything is in the waiting time. It's timed, so the advertiser cannot modify the content and will be just ignored. But if you're waiting for enough time, we can come again. And this time we have to include this ticket in our request. Right, and now when this registration comes, I'll calculate a new waiting time, which will be based on my current content of the topic table, because it would have changed from the last time. And I check, so I can, based on this initial request timestamp, I can check for how long this advertiser has been waiting for already. And if my waiting time is lower than the time the advertiser already waited for, I say, okay, you waited for enough time, I add it to the table. If not, we repeat the process. So I'll just issue a new ticket, I send it back to the advertiser has to wait and come back. But in any case, even with increasing waiting times, the advertiser will accumulate more and more waiting time as well as it waits, and eventually will be admitted into the table. Okay, I don't have enough of time. Right. So for the waiting time formula, we said that there is, well, this occupancy score times the diversity score. So for this occupancy score, again, this is to limit the resources used by the registrar, so I never go beyond the specific limit. And also spreads the load again across the network. So if I receive a lot of traffic, my table will fill up, and then my waiting times will also be increasing, which means that I will limit the incoming traffic to my node. On the other hand, if there are other nodes they are not so full, they will return lower waiting times, which means they'll get more traffic. And this is kind of this auto balance mechanism in this protocol. And then we have this diversity score. So as I said, this is just comparing the content of the request to the content I already have in my table. The reason for that is, first of all, well, I hope that I will simplify the admission for the unpopular topics. Unpopular topics are, well, unpopular, so I don't expect a lot of registration for this topic in the registrars. So it means that my registration will be more diverse from what's in the table. I'll have a lower waiting time than some popular topics. It also makes Discv5 resistant to network dynamics because, well, I care about diversity of every single registrar. So even if one is down, it's not a big problem because we have the registration for this specific IP, ID, and topic also in other places in the network. And also we help with this waiting time to prevent some civil attacks because, well, if now I have a limited amount of IPs or IDs that I can use for an attack, at some point, if I start to filling the tables, I will get the higher and higher waiting time, limiting the amount of registration that I can place on a specific node. Right, so this is how we calculate the occupancy score. We can forget about this BA and this power. Those are just some parameters, but the important part is we have this 1 minus, and here we have n. N is just like the limit of the table. So let's say this is, I don't know, 100, which means that I don't want to have more entries than 100 in my table. And then D is the current number of entries in the table. So if I have, I don't know, 50 50 entries and my limit is 100. Well, this will be 50 divided by 100, so half, and then 1 minus half will be half as well. And then the function looks basically like this. So as I approach the limit that I specified, so in this case 10, the waiting time or this occupancy score will go to the infinity, which guarantees also that I will never go beyond the limit or the table capacity that I set at the beginning. And again, here we just have some parameters that we can use to tweak the whole procedure. For the diversity score, it's based on the IP, ID, and the topic, because that's what we get from the registration. And then the whole diversity score will be just a sum of the similarity score for the IP plus similarity score for the ID, and then for the topic. So I just summed them up. And then all of them will be from 0 to 1, 1 meaning very similar, 0 being, well, not very similar. So the whole diversity score can go from 0 to 3. And so if we start with the topic, this is a very simple formula. So again, we can ignore this power here. This is just a parameter. But when I receive a registration for a specific topic, I will take, well, the number of registration I already have for this topic, and I'll divide it for the total number of registration that I have in the table. So if I receive a registration for a topic that I don't have in my table, well, the score will be 0. And if I receive a registration for a topic and I already have this topic already in my table, the score will be 1, so the highest one. And we use exactly the same formula for IDs as well. Now, at the beginning, we used the same formula for IPs, but there was a problem, because you can imagine that an attacker can still produce a large number of very similar IDs. So for instance, when you control an IPv4 subnet, say /16 or an IPv6 prefix, and based on the formula here, well, they will be all different. So even if my IDs, I can generate a lot of IDs, say 10, 10, 10, 1 to 250, they will be not seen as similar, because they will be just here. We just say decide whether they are the same or not. So that's why we're looking for a way that will also capture not only whether two addresses are the same or not, but also kind of give me an idea of a distance. So then if there's an attacker with controlling a specific prefix, it can still generate a lot of IP addresses, but they will be very similar. So then I can still give them a high similarity score. So to achieve that in an efficient way, because again, we don't want any complicated operations on the registrar, we use the binary tree. So the binary tree at the beginning, in every node will have a counter. At the beginning, this counter is always set to 0. So they're initialized by 0, and it will fill up as we add more IP addresses in the table. And then each edge will have 2 edges for every single node, meaning 0 and 1, and they will represent the consecutive bits in the IP address. So when I want to add a new IP address to my table, well, I take this IP address and I write it in a binary format. So here 128 is translated to 10000, so 7 zeros. And then we just translate every single component like this. And then I just take bit by bit, and I will traverse this tree based on the edges. So at the beginning, we go to the root node. I will increase the counter in this node, which means so the root will store the total amount of IP addresses I have in my structure. Then I'll say, okay, my first bit is 1, so I take this edge, so I go to this node, I increase it by 1. Then the next bit is 0, so I go to this node, I increase it by 1, and so on. And then traverse my tree like this. So we will have 32 levels for every single bit in the IP address. And now when traversing this tree, I'll also calculate a score. And the score will be basically all the counters that I encountered raised to the power of the level of the tree. So here this is root, so it's level 0, so it's 9 to the power of 0. Then I'll add plus 5 to the power of 1 because we're on the level 1. Then we have 3 to the power of 2. Then we have 2 to the power of 3, and so on. And again, I go until the end. So if now I have the higher the score becomes, it means that I have like a lot of very similar addresses. So if this if this is high, it means that I have a lot of similar addresses in my table already. On the other hand, if it's low, it means that even if I have a lot of addresses in this in my tree, they're different from what I'm inputting now. And then we just use this this function. This is just to normalize the whole thing. So again, our previous scores for topics and IDs were going from 0 to 1. So here, this represents just the maximum score that will be achieved when well, I have only, let's say, 10 IP address 100 times in my IPnet in my table, and now I'm trying to put one more on top of that. So in such a case, this score will be 1. So I see that I have only 9 minutes left. So maybe if you have questions, we can do them now. And then if there are no questions, I can maybe show you one more component of the system. Would that work? Or
I think so. Maybe one short question. So this is a way to calculate the diversity. Why do you propose this choice?
sorry, but I can't hear you very well.
So this is a way to
you know what? Sorry, give me a second. I'll try to plug my headphones still to my computer. Maybe I'll hear because there's quite a lot of echo and it's from the.
Do you hear me?
1 second. If I do, can you talk now?
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Yeah, now this is fine.
Okay. So the short question. So you propose here a way to calculate the diversity score.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there are other choices. Why do you propose these choices?
So we checked quite a lot of approaches to this. So we started with a very simple one. So this one, and it seems improved to work pretty well for the whole system. It just wasn't working for the AP. So then we're just trying to iterate on that to make something more resistant to this Sybil IDs.
So it is a kind of empirical choice, if I understand well.
Yes, but also we know that it must be something very simple because well, you trigger calculation of this formula every single time you receive a request. Okay. So if it's something more fancy and it it's computationally complicated, then someone can perform a DOS attack just by sending you a request and forcing you to calculate a new waiting time. Okay. But if we are still in the working phase, so if you have any suggestion for a better diversity score, I'm very open to discussing that.
Well, I just was wondering why this choice is starting. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions?
So if I may, it seems like you are trying with like 2 main methods. One is kind of cost for cryptography of let's say impersonating an identity, and the other one is making, let's say, honest nodes more skeptical about new things appearing on the network. So I was wondering, what is the capability of your adversary that you are considering in your design?
So here we assume arbitrary attacker, so we can do whatever we want, but we assume a limited amount of IPs and IDs that a specific attacker can control. And then in the simulations, we just play with this ratio. So we run simulations. Okay, what if an attacker has a 10% of IPs present in the network, or 20%, or 50%, and so on. And then we try to observe what happens and what damage it can do.
Yeah. What about IPv6, or what about like attackers with cloud computing capabilities? So using a little bit of addresses here and there in many subnets over the entire range.
Right. So with IPv6, it should be okay because like the whole scheme should work. And again, with this similarity score, even if you control IPv6 prefix, you can turn it to IP addresses, but they'll have a similar. Will they be similar? So they will have a high score, a diversity score. For the cloud, well, yeah, there is a problem. I mean, but this is an open system. We cannot like kind of verify if the registration is benign or not. So if someone now spends thousands of dollars, of euros just to attack this small network, then we can't do much. So I think the more idea here is that we have this network, the larger it grows, the more difficult is it to attack, and then the more resources an attacker has to spend. But again, if you have unlimited budget and you can just rent 1 million IPs on AWS, there is not much we can do.
Thank you.
Any more questions? If not, I can try to talk about one more problem that I have, or we can end now. I don't know what are the time constraints. Oh, you do not hear me. Can you hear me now?
I think some of us can hear you. I don't know.
I mean because I'm between my phone and my laptop, and I can hear myself on my laptop. That's why I'm a bit confused. How about now?
Feedback.
Can you hear me now?
There's feedback between them. Yeah.
Let me disconnect from here. Can you hear me now then? Or not?
I can hear you. I don't know the other people in the room. Like the main room at Links. Are you there, guys?
Yes, it's working. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, sorry for that. This is the first time I had any issues with the microphone. But anyway, I think we don't have more time. So I just wanted to present you one more slide with the things we are still struggling. So if maybe have a solution to that, it would be great. We're in any case in the phase with the public consultations with Ethereum. So any input is very valuable. Right. So the problem is, in any case, in the system, the efficiency and the security is kind of at odds. So the more advertisements we put, the more random we make them, the more secure the system becomes, but at the same time, the overhead increases as well. It's pretty tricky to find a good balance here. It's still, well, yeah. And the other problem is we are looking for this is a pretty specific request, a stopping condition for the registration process. So maybe you can recall in the lookup, I'll go from buckets to buckets. I'll try to query some random nodes in every single bucket. And at some point I can say, okay, I have enough registrations. I don't have to go to the buckets closer to the topic hash. And this is great for the load balance, for the overall performance of the entire system. Now, we would like to do something similar for the registration. So saying, okay, I go to bucket 1, I register on some nodes, and I go to bucket 2, 3, and 4. And sometimes I say, okay, this is enough. I don't have to go closer. but we can do it only if we kind of detect a congestion, meaning that there are already a lot of registration for this topic hash in the network, so it's enough. You don't have to put more. But now detecting this congestion is pretty difficult because again, you can have some malicious register that will say, hey, there is a congestion, so we don't continue. Or if there is a congestion, they can say, no, there is no congestion, carry on, just to flood the most loaded nodes and so on. So we are also currently looking for robust ways to do that. So if you happen to have any suggestions, I'd be happy to talk about it.
Actually, so I may have half a question, half a suggestion, if you want to do that. So I'm more used to the code structure than Kademlia, but I believe it's pretty much the same. It's just a ring versus hypercube. And I kind of remember that, so your approach, basically, it's proactive in the sense that you want to place your replicas. But I remember that for code, for instance, it was very efficient to use back caching. That is, when you select a DHT rod, instead of returning directly the answer, you return the answer through the DHT rod, and you can offer the possibility to cache the results in between. And it's supposed to achieve, I believe, the same replica repartition that the one you want to make here. So have you tried to see that policy, backtracking the DHT rods and doing caching on the nodes you pass by?
Right. So we didn't do it for the roads, but for the the thing is, because it depends. It's kind of like the DNS wall. Usually, so for the roads, no, we didn't try it. So we're considering for the advertisements. But the thing is, if someone even gives me some advertisements, I'll never come back to say, hey, I fetched it from someone closer, like keep it in the cache.
But what I wanted to say is that just if you look at people asking for the key, and if you look at the distribution of the rods, you will obtain exactly the distribution that you want to achieve. And then it's just a question of caching things. And because you're using the request, you will be using the popularity of the content to determine what will be the optimal caching policy. So it's kind of a win-win. The only issue is that you don't have a proactive behavior, but you will be able to cope instantly to the demand for a given content.
But do you need the recursive queries here? So if I ask for someone, I tell, okay, I'm looking for this node, and if you don't know, like forward it further on, or it will work also in the iterative. So if I ask you, you just give me some information, and it's up to me to query the DHT further.
Sorry, I didn't answer fully, but basically you follow the DHT rod, and at every step point, if the node has already cached an answer for your request, it can give you that answer exactly like you do with your replicas, actually. Okay. And then you've got to decide a caching policy, but I believe it's pretty much what you do when you decide what should you do to optimize your table size and things like that. So you kind of reverse the problem and you turn that into a caching policy, but I don't know.
Okay, that's a good idea. That would be nice to test it. If you can also maybe send me an email later on, we can maybe discuss it offline.
Okay.
Thank you.